You know, in the big, messy world of geopolitics, you'd think allies are allies, right? Well, not exactly. Today, we're going to dig into this fascinating puzzle at the very heart of U.S. strategy in Asia. It's all about two key partners, and man, the way America treats them couldn't be more different.
So here it is, the big question we're tackling today. Why is one of America's key allies kind of seen as a negotiable bargaining chip, while another one is considered this indispensable, untouchable lynchpin? The answer to that? Well, it tells you pretty much everything you need to know about how the game is played right now.
All right, let's start peeling back the layers. Our first piece of the puzzle comes from this really wild sequence of events that happens super fast, and it all revolves around one single phone call. This is like a masterclass in how diplomacy really works, where the silences often shout louder than the words.
Okay, you've got to pay super close attention to the timing here, because it's everything. On September 17th, you have Taiwan making this huge gesture of friendship, offering to buy $100 billion in U.S. farm products. Then, bam, the very next day, the U.S. turns around and rejects a $5.6 billion arms sale that Taiwan really needed. And then the day after that, President Trump gets on the phone with President Xi of China. Come on, that timing is it's not a coincidence. No way.
And here's the kicker. This is what Trump says right after that call. He's talking trade, he's talking fentanyl, he's talking about a future meeting, but notice what's missing. Not a single word about Taiwan. That silence, combined with that timing, that's not just a message to Beijing, it's a massive flashing neon sign. So, what exactly is that message? What's the signal being sent? It's pretty clear. Taiwan is being used as a piece on a much bigger chessboard. And that's the real gut punch here. The signal being sent is that America's commitment to Taiwan's security, it's conditional, it's negotiable, it's a bargaining chip to get concessions from China on other stuff like trade. This is a really high-stakes game, and Taiwan's future is literally what's being wagered.
Okay, so now let's pivot. Let's talk about South Korea, because its situation is the polar opposite. South Korea isn't a bargaining chip, it's the whole darn foundation. It's the bedrock of U.S. strategy in the entire region.
And that word linchpin, it's so important to understand. A linchpin isn't just another part of the machine, it's the one critical piece that holds the whole thing together. You pull out the linchpin, and the entire structure just collapses. And for the US and East Asia, South Korea is that linchpin. And this just lays it out so clearly. Look at South Korea, a formal treaty ally, home to massive US military bases, a direct deterrent to North Korea. Then you look at Taiwan, a policy of strategic ambiguity, arms sales, and a huge semiconductor hub, for sure. But the relationship is fundamentally different. One is a solid cornerstone, the other, well, it's more of a strategic variable.
So let's break this down. Why is South Korea so indispensable? First, just look at a map. Its location is incredible, right at the crossroads of China, Japan, and Russia. Second, those military bases, they allow the U.S. to project power all across the region. Third, you can't even begin to talk about managing the North Korean threat without South Korea. And maybe the biggest reason of all, credibility. If the U.S. walked away from a formal treaty ally like South Korea, its promises to every other ally in the world would suddenly look worthless. The entire system could just fall apart.
And hey, if you need any more proof, just look at this. This was a pretty wild suggestion from President Trump that the U.S. bases in South Korea should basically become sovereign U.S. territory. Think about that. It's like an accidental confession of just how critically important those bases are. You don't try to get a permanent piece of real estate in a place you're planning on leaving, right?
Okay, so we've established South Korea is the linchpin, the non-negotiable ally. So how does the U.S. make absolutely sure that linchpin stays firmly in place, especially with all the tension with China? Well, the answer comes down to one thing, money. And I mean, a lot of money.
Yeah, $350 billion. Just let that number roll around in your head for a second. That's the proposed size of a brand new investment fund between the U.S. and South Korea. And this isn't just about making money or simple trade. This is a massive strategic play. It's designed to basically fuse the two economies together to make them inseparable.
There's a name for this strategy. It's called economic tethering. Think of it like a strategic insurance policy. The idea is, if you intertwine your economy so deeply, you make it almost impossible for your key ally to ever drift away, say into China's sphere of influence. Their success becomes your success, and vice versa.
But don't think for a second that South Korea is just going along for the ride. No, they are playing this game with incredible skill. This is a fascinating look at their diplomatic strategy. When the US makes some, let's say, excessive demands, they don't just slam the door and say no. They'll praise their counterpart's business savvy, but then gently steer the conversation back to something more balanced and realistic. It's honestly a masterclass in how to negotiate from a position of strength without alienating your most important partner.
And just to make things more intense, there's a ticking clock, a hard deadline. The US absolutely needs to get this deal finalized before the APEC summit on October 31st. Why? Because showing up to meet President Xi without having locked down your lynchpin ally, that looks weak. And that deadline, well, that gives South Korea a whole lot of leverage, but they have to be incredibly careful about how they use it.
So that brings us to the big final question, right? In a world dominated by giants like the US and China, how does a country like South Korea, the lynchpin, hold its ground? Being that critical piece gives you security, for sure. It gives you leverage. But it also means you're constantly walking this diplomatic tightrope, trying to secure your own interests. The choices they make next, they're not just going to shape their future, they could reshape the entire strategic map of Asia.